Have you ever wondered, what if the moment you've been waiting for has already started and you didn't even notice? What if the greatest countdown in human history isn't somewhere in the distant future, but is happening right now in the silence all around us? This isn't science fiction. It isn't another conspiracy theory. It's something far deeper, something Jesus himself spoke of. We often imagine the end of days as a spectacular scene. Explosions in the skies, alarms blaring across the nations, breaking news flashing on every screen. The end has come. But what if the truth looks nothing like that? What if the beginning of the end was so quiet, so subtle, so deeply spiritual that almost everyone missed it? That's the shocking reality we need to face. The countdown to the rapture, the moment when Jesus calls his people home, didn't start with chaos. It began with a whisper, a shift so gentle it slipped beneath the noise of our busy routines. No government announcements, no earthquakes, no sirens, just a change in the atmosphere of the spirit, a change so profound it altered everything, and yet almost no one noticed. Most of the world still believes they're waiting for the first sign. But the truth is, the clock is already ticking. The beginning isn't coming, it's already here. And the scariest part? For many, the countdown is almost over, but they're still asleep. Think about it. How often do we tell ourselves we'll know when the time comes? We assume there will be dramatic warnings, obvious events, or some undeniable sign. But Jesus himself told us that when it begins, it will catch people off guard, like a thief in the night. Quiet, unexpected, invisible to the distracted. That's exactly what has happened. The rapture countdown has already started, not with politics, not with global disasters, but with something far more dangerous and far more personal: the cooling of hearts. Imagine walking into a room where the air feels just a little colder than before. At first, you don't notice. You're too busy scrolling on your phone, answering emails, or laughing with friends. But slowly as time passes, that chill seeps into your bones. And before you realize it, the whole room has changed. That's what's happening in the spirit right now. The warmth of faith, the fire of conviction, the love that once burned bright in people's hearts, it's fading. And Jesus already warned us this will be the very sign to watch for. Because iniquity will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Matthew 24, verse 12. That wasn't just poetry. That was a timestamp, a marker, a signal that the countdown had begun. But here's the problem. We expect God to move with fireworks, when in reality, he often moves in whispers. He doesn't need to shake the earth to start the clock. He just shifts the heart. And so, while the world waits for a thunderclap, heaven's countdown has already been activated. So where does that leave us? It leaves us at a crossroads. Because if the rapture countdown has already begun, then the question is no longer when will it start, but rather, how will I live now that it's already happening? This is where our journey really begins. In the next part, we'll uncover the signs that most people overlooked, the reasons so few recognize them, and what this means for your life right now. Because make no mistake, you haven't missed the beginning. You're living in it. When Jesus walked through the dusty roads of Galilee, the air was filled with more than just the scent of bread baking in clay ovens or the hum of villagers going about their day. There was something unseen, an expectancy, a tension between heaven and earth. People didn't fully grasp it, but in his every word, every step, there was a message beyond what their eyes could see. Imagine standing among the crowd, the sun beating down, sweat on your brow, yet your heart hanging on his every word. When he spoke, it wasn't like the religious teachers who repeated tradition. His words carried life, like water pouring over dry ground. And still, hidden within his parables and prophecies were warnings, mysteries, and promises of what was to come. Jesus didn't just speak about kindness or forgiveness, though he embodied those fully. He often lifted the veil on the greater story unfolding, the clash between light and darkness, between the kingdom of heaven and the powers of the world. To truly hear him was to sense that history itself was bending toward a climax. One day, he looked at his disciples, men who had left fishing nets, tax booths, and families to follow him, and told them of times unlike anything the world had seen. Wars, rumors of wars, nations rising against nations. Not just storms in political realm, but shaking in the heavens and earth. He spoke of a moment when the temple they revered would be destroyed, when not one stone would remain upon another. To the listeners of his time, this sounded unimaginable. The temple was the heart of Jewish faith, the place where heaven and earth touched. And yet, Jesus spoke with such certainty, as though he had already seen it crumble into dust. His words weren't meant to stir fear, but prepare hearts. He wanted them and us to understand the world systems, no matter how strong, are temporary. He painted the picture in parables, stories simple enough for children to understand, yet profound enough to confound scholars. A fig tree sprouting leaves, signaling summer's arrival. 10 virgins waiting for the bridegroom. Some wise and ready with oil, others unprepared and left in the dark. Servants entrusted with talents, opportunities, resources, and time, called to faithfulness, knowing their master would return. Every story pointed to one truth: readiness. Not in fear, but in faith. Not in frantic scrambling, but in steady trust. While the kingdoms of men fought for power, Jesus described a kingdom that flipped everything upside down. The first would be last. The humble would be exalted. The meek, not the mighty, would inherit the earth. To the Roman soldiers who ruled with iron, this sounded absurd. To the religious elite, it was threatening. But to the broken, the poor, the one society pushed aside, his words were life itself. They could finally believe that God saw them, that their story wasn't forgotten, that justice, though delayed, would come. And still, even as he gave comfort, he never hid the cost of following him. He warned his disciples that persecution would come, that standing with him meant standing against the tide of the world. But he coupled every warning with hope. Take heart, for I have overcome the world. It wasn't just about enduring hardship. It was about remembering that in the darkest night, light always wins. Every prophecy, every warning, every parable had a thread running through it: the cross. Long before nails pierced his hands, he carried the shadow of the sacrifice to come. He told his disciples plainly that he would be betrayed, mocked, beaten, and crucified. But even then he spoke of resurrection. It's here where his story shifts from being a good teacher or wise prophet to something far greater. He wasn't simply describing events as a fortune teller might. He was the very center of the story. The war he described wasn't just between nations. It was between sin and salvation, death and eternal life. And he would stand in the middle, bearing the full weight, so that you and I could stand free. Now pause and think. If you were in that crowd, hearing him speak, how would you respond? Would you dismiss him as too radical, too unrealistic? Or would something in your heart whisper, this is truth? The disciples themselves wrestled with doubt, confusion, even fear. And yet they stayed close. Why? Because in Jesus they saw not only words but power. The blind saw, the lame walked, the outcasts found dignity, the dead were raised. How could they deny what their own eyes witnessed? Today, his words still echo across centuries. Wars still rage. Nations still tremble. Hearts still grow weary. And yet, the same invitation stands: to watch, to be ready, to trust not in systems of this world, but in the one who holds eternity. What Jesus described wasn't just about a distant future. It was unfolding then, and it's unfolding now. His kingdom is already here, breaking in when forgiveness is offered, when love overcomes hate, when light pierces the dark. But it's also not yet complete. The fullness is still coming. This tension, the already and not yet, can be hard to grasp, but maybe that's the beauty of faith. It's choosing to believe in the unseen, to live as though the victory is already secure even when the world looks chaotic. And Jesus never left us without help. He promised the Holy Spirit, a comforter and guide, to walk with us, to give strength when we feel weak, and to remind us of the hope set before us. Jesus often spoke of the end of the age not as destruction, but as birth pains. Painful, yes. Intense, yes. But leading to something new. A new heaven, a new earth, where tears are wiped away and death is no more. To those who followed him, this wasn't an escape plan, but a promise of restoration, that all things broken would be made whole, that love would have the final word. And as we journey further into the story, we'll see how his final hours on earth didn't end the story. They ignited it. For in his death came life, and in his resurrection came the assurance that what he promised will surely come. As the crowd slowly dispersed from the hillsides of Galilee, some carried home baskets of bread and fish, while others carried something far more precious, words that would echo in their hearts for the rest of their lives. The parables Jesus told were not meant to be locked away in dusty memory. They were seeds, scattered freely by the teacher, waiting to find fertile soil in the hearts of those who would receive them. But here's the mystery. Not everyone walked away changed. Some returned to their daily routines, shaking their heads in confusion, unable to grasp why a carpenter's son from Nazareth spoke as if he carried the authority of heaven. Others, however, went home restless, awakened by a stirring they could not ignore. They could not stop replaying his words. Whoever has ears, let them hear. And isn't that the same challenge for us today? The parables were more than stories. They were a mirror. When Jesus spoke of the Good Samaritan, the hearers had to ask, "Who is my neighbor?" When he described the prodigal son, the proud had to wrestle with the Father's compassion. And when he spoke of treasures hidden in fields, people had to choose, what do I value most? Through every story, Jesus was drawing a dividing line, not one of condemnation, but of invitation. It was as if he was saying, "Here is the kingdom. Will you step in?" Imagine standing there, dusty sandals on rocky ground, the smell of the sea in the air, your children tugging at your robe while you listen to the voice of this rabbi. His words are simple, but they land like thunder in your soul. You realize that he is not asking you to just listen. He is asking you to decide. Because every story carried an invitation. To forgive when forgiveness feels impossible. To love when love feels undeserved. To believe when doubt shouts louder than faith. To follow even when the path leads through the valley of shadows. And that invitation has never expired. 2,000 years later, his words still cut through the noise of our world. But just as in his day, many still turn away. Some dismiss him as irrelevant. Others twist his words to fit their own desires. And just as he warned, when the seed falls on hard soil, the birds quickly snatch it away. When it falls among thorns, the worries of life choke it. Friend, this is not just an ancient story. It is our story. Every time you hear his words, the question arises, will I let the seed grow, or will I let it die? The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scholars of the law, they had all the scriptures. They knew every prophecy, every commandment. Yet, when the living word stood before them, they could not see him. Their pride blinded them, and their fear of losing power hardened their hearts. And here lies a sobering truth. It is possible to know about God yet miss God himself. From the hills of Galilee to the crowded streets of Jerusalem, Jesus' ministry moved toward a final climax. Every parable, every healing, every confrontation was leading to the cross. The leaders plotted. The disciples struggled to understand, and the crowd swayed between worship and doubt. But through it all, he never stopped inviting. Even in his last hours, nailed to the cross, he extended the same invitation he had given from the beginning. Father, forgive them. It was never just about stories. It was about salvation. And now, across centuries, his voice still echoes. The question is no longer what the crowd in Galilee decided. The question is, what will you decide? Will you be the soil where his word withers, or the soil where it grows 30, 60, even 100-fold? Will you cling to the treasures of this world, or will you sell everything to gain the treasure hidden in the field? Perhaps you feel far from him, like the prodigal son in a distant land. The good news is this: the Father still runs to meet you. Perhaps you feel like the wounded man on the road, beaten down by life. The good news is this: the Good Samaritan still stops for you. These are not distant fables. They are windows into the very heart of God. So let me ask you, where do you find yourself in his parables today? Are you the lost sheep he is searching for? The wise builder who builds on the rock, or the foolish one on sand? The servant who multiplied his talents, or the one who buried in the ground? The beauty and the challenge of Jesus' teaching is that his stories never let us stay neutral. They demand a response. And here's the good news. His arms remain open. The invitation stands. 2,000 years have passed, yet the stories still breathe. They remind us that God's kingdom is not a distant dream. It is here, breaking into our world one heart at a time. When Jesus told his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few," he was not just talking about fields of wheat. He was talking about us, about the mission of carrying his word into every corner of the earth. So today, as you hear these words, imagine once more the teacher standing on the hillside. The sun dips low, the sea glimmers, and his voice carries across the crowd. He looks at you, not just the crowd, but you, and asks, "Will you follow me?" The story is not finished. It continues with you.